Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Simone Ostrowski, and I'm here with my colleague David Whitten. We're both employment lawyers at Whitten and Lublin Employment Lawyers. We're here today to talk about the recent repeal of the Bill 148 changes to the Employment Standards Act. A bit of background. The Ontario government, about a year or so ago, had made some changes to the Employment Standards Act. It was introduced through Bill 148, introduced a number of changes that were very employee-friendly. And recently, the new government has proposed to repeal some of those changes. So David Whitten is going to start us off by talking about what he's most concerned about with the recent repeal.
Yeah, well, it's going to be more of the same, unfortunately. A lot of the changes that were favorable to employees were not to come into force until January of 2019 anyway. So, unfortunately, employees haven't benefited from a lot of what's being repealed. My biggest concerns are around what in the past was the fact that an employee had no right to request schedule changes or change to work location. Under the new legislative changes, there was this, after 3 months, an employee could ask to have those changes implemented. Whether they were granted or not remains to be seen, but at least it opened the door for that type of discussion. We also had a provision that said in the new legislation that if an employee's shift they were on call or their shift was canceled within 48 hours of them starting, that they would be entitled to a minimum 3 hours of pay. That's been repealed, so that won't be the case, which practically means your employer now can cancel your shift within 2 days, where there's no specific amount of notice they had to give you, and you're not going to get paid for it. The misclassification of independent contractors versus employees, the new legislation proposed that there would be an onus, in other words, the obligation to prove that the independent contractor was in fact an independent contractor, not an employee. If challenged by the Ministry of Labor, the onus would rest with the employer, who is probably in the best position to produce the documentation and argue that case. Now it's going to go back to where it was before, and that's both parties are responsible for producing the evidence and trying to justify the classification. So it's a bit of a regression in my view. Anything good in there, Simone, for employees?
I think there's a little bit of good in it so far as there's some clarity around some of the changes that I think were a bit confusing. For example, there was a new calculation for public holiday pay with Bill 148. It was incredibly confusing. There was a lot of criticism that it made it difficult for businesses to hire part-time employees because it really was very confusing and perhaps overpaid part-time employees for public holiday pay. So one change that we're seeing now is that public holiday pay calculation is going back to the old formula. It's a lot easier to calculate. Another example is with respect to personal emergency leave. One of the Bill 148 changes was that an employer could not make it mandatory that an employee provide a doctor's note to justify one of those leaves, but they could, for example, require other documents such as a note from a Chinese medicine practitioner or a dentist. So the difference was really minimal. And now the repeal has made it so that, or will make it so that, an employer can require evidence that is reasonable in the circumstances, which may include a doctor's note, which sounds a bit more common sense and perhaps what many of us already believe is the case. So that's one change that I would say is good in the sense that it brings clarity to what workers are required to provide and what employers are entitled to ask for. There is going to be no more increase to the minimum wage come January 1st, 2019. That's one major change. Another major change is that like you said, scheduling rules, if an employee's shift is cut short, they're not going to be entitled to that 3 hours minimum pay. There's going to be no more 10 personal emergency leave days for employees to take. Instead, what's being proposed is 3 days per year for personal illness, 2 days for bereavement leave, and 3 days per year for urgent family circumstances. For example, your child is sick, your babysitter canceled, what have you. So instead of having those 10 blanket days, the government's getting a lot more specific about when you can take a leave.
I suppose one other change that's going to remain in force is the fact that people now, after 5 years of employment, be entitled to 3 weeks vacation versus the 2 weeks that has been in place now since 2000. So you're going to get 1 more week's vacation after 5 years of employment. That's always a good thing. Okay, let's go to a question. Somebody has asked us, what is the difference between an independent contractor and an employee? So I'll start off. I mean, the biggest differences on their face are that in an independent contractor, there is no deductions at source for income tax or EI or CPP. So that's one big difference. The independent contractor also has the ability to write off certain expenses, whereas an employee has a limited ability to do that. Independent contractors don't get public holiday pay, they don't get vacation pay, and in some cases they aren't entitled to as much pay in lieu of notice of termination as an employee would be. Any other differences that you can see, Simone?
Well, what we tend to see is workers who come in and they've been paid as a contractor, say for 10 years, and then all of a sudden their contract is terminated by the company, and all of a sudden they're not entitled to any pay in lieu of notice of termination, whereas employees, when their contract of employment is terminated, are entitled to significant notice of termination, depending on how long that worker has been with the company. Under the Employment Standards Act, termination pay, we see 1 week per year of service, up to a maximum of 8 weeks. So contractors, in contrast, would not necessarily entitled to any of that. So oftentimes we see people that come in, their contract has been terminated, they've been provided with nothing, and they say, hey, I've effectively been an employee. I should have received some sort of pay in lieu of notice of my contract terminating. And then we have to go to the Ministry of Labor often and say, this person was really an employee. They should be getting termination pay.
Right. Good points. As always, if you require legal advice, you know where to find us. Our contact information is on our website, and thank you for joining us today and listening to Simone and I.
Thank you.